Dawn.
I'll do the introduction and then Councillor Lee can make his announcement, which we can put in the minutes. And then we'll carry.
That's fine. But Dawn didn't attend by the looks of it, or something went wrong. So don't worry, carry on. I'll mute.
Well, I welcome you all to this virtual pension board meeting. Present at the meeting are members of the pension board and a number of council officers. Before we propose, can I remind all attendees to turn off their mobile phones? That's a good point there, really. Better remind the chairman to do that as well. And you need your videos on at all time, except Councillor Lee, of course, may be in some difficulty on that. And put your microphones on mute too, unless speaking. Officers will keep their videos off and microphones on mute unless they're invited to speak. In case of a technical problem, the meeting will adjourn until the issue is resolved. If the technical problem persists and the meeting is in quorate, the meeting will be adjourned and rearranged for a later date. The meeting is being audio and video recorded and will be available to watch and listen on the website. And I'm sure you'll all want to see the rerun of it afterwards. Right, and shall we start then? Apologies for absence. There can't be any apologies for absence, I think, as we're all here. Declaration of interest. Declaration of interest from members of the pension board have been published and are taken as read. Are there any other declarations for members present in the virtual meeting? No? Fine. We turn to item 2, which is the minutes of the last meeting. Are you happy with the minutes of the meeting there, 17th of September? That only applies, of course, to Councillor Lee and Gerald. Happy?
Yeah, I agree. That's fine.
Okay, I will sign them, and as we did last time, I sign them and send them back. Item 3, public questions. I gather I haven't been notified of any public questions, so I imagine that there aren't any public questions. Petitions, none received. Deputations. We haven't got any notification of any deputations. So we're on to item 6, membership of the pension board. I'm very pleased to welcome, because we've been a bit sparse on members, so it's a great pleasure to welcome Patrick O'Dwyer, who's the Divisional Director of Education Services at Harwich Council, who's been appointed to the position of Scheme Members Representative, Active Members. Appointment was formally confirmed at the council meeting on the 26th of November. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
We're very pleased to see you here, and we actually hope that you'll get some enjoyment and satisfaction out of being a member of the pension board.
Thank you. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Good. So the board notes the change to membership then, and that's all we're asked to do in this case, and that's fine. Then we come to the item 7, review of the pension fund committee items, and we'll ask Jeremy to introduce the report.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll be brief on this one. I'll draw board members' attention to the supplementary paper which we circulated at the end of last week following the pension fund committee meeting, which took place after this agenda was published. The audit of accounts, the recommendation that was in that report was agreed. That particular item is on your agenda this evening. Similarly, the regulatory changes in court judgments affecting the LGPS. The recommendations there to enable us to deal with the regulatory conflict were approved by the pension fund committee. Again, that item is on this agenda for further consideration. as is the pension fund risk register. In terms of the performance dashboard and update, the committee noted the fund performance, and the only thing to note there was the training session that will take place before the committee's next meeting will focus on the currency hedging that's undertaken around the global equity portfolio. So if board members are interested to that, you will receive the invitation to that, and you'll be very welcome to join us if you think that will be of interest. In terms of the part 2 item, the investment strategy review, the members received a confidential report from Dawn and a detailed paper from Aon, and have approved a number of changes to the equity portfolio, including the replacement of Oldfield with the London Civ Sustainable Equity Manager, RBC, and we'll be working to manage the transition of that. The next stage of the funds review will be looking at the diversifying return assets and also the risk control assets. There are some challenges around the LaSalle property portfolio, which is part of the diversifying return group, and the London Civ are proposing to make some changes around their MAC fund, which is managed by CQS, and so that's why we're planning to look at both of those buckets at the same meeting next time. I think that's all I need to say on that one, Chair.
I wonder if you could just explain to us on the regulatory charges and court judgments, the difficulties that has been caused by the central government regulation limiting the leaving sums for local government officers, which I came to the Pensions Committee and I heard the debate about the fact that this conflicts with the current LGPS scheme, and I just wonder if you could explain that to the pension board so that all the pension board members grasp that this is not entirely straightforward.
I can do that now, Chair. The more detailed paper is actually item 10 on the agenda, if you'd prefer to do it at that point.
All right, I didn't realise that. I must have missed that. I didn't realise it was explained at 10. Oh yeah, okay. We'll leave it till item 10 then.
Okay.
Right, open to anybody to ask questions, anything you wish to comment on?
Chair, can I ask something, please?
Of course.
As I read the agenda papers, and it might be that this was just covered a moment ago, and I didn't pick up on it quick enough, in which case I apologise. But my recollection is that there were 2 funds that were picked up in the annual report and elsewhere as being underperforming, and Jeremy just referred to one of them, which is being swapped over into a Civ fund. And I'm sorry, I can't immediately state the name of the other one, but he'll know what it is. Forgive me for that. Did you just cover that as well, Jeremy, or is that just something that's still under review?
The Longview, I didn't specifically mention Longview. I probably should have done. Longview is the second one of our active equity managers, and again their performance, whilst it hasn't been as bad as Oldfield, there have been some challenges. There've also been some changes in key personnel at Oldfield, and they've been under. The London Civ has had them. I need to use the correct terminology. The London Civ has enhanced monitoring. That's the phrase. The London Civ has sort of a four tier monitoring system. Tier 1 is the normal monitoring. Tier 2 is what they call enhanced monitoring, and Longview are still currently on the LCIV's enhanced monitoring list. However, Aon have done some detailed work, and their current view is that Longview is still an appropriate manager and doing what we've engaged them to do, and they feel that the performance issues that they've had are much more temporary than Oldfield, which has Oldfield is partly a systemic thing because value investing has been has delivered poor returns for a significant period of time. And the second issue with Oldfield is that even within the universe, for want of a better word, of value managers, Oldfield have underperformed significantly against their peer group, and so that's the reason we feel it's time. There are two reasons. We feel we want to move from value to a different investment style, which RBC and the Sustainable Equity Fund will give us. The second is that actually, if we were sticking with a value manager, Oldfield probably wouldn't be the one that we would stick with. There were some concerns not only about their performance, but also some of their decision making. Some of the recent decision making has been counterintuitive, I think, is the kindest word. I would say. Colin Robertson used a slightly different word, but counterintuitive, I think, would cover what he was saying.
I mean, it's understandable in terms of the coordination's gone through in the last 6 months, in that it's difficult to come to prompt decisions. But from a governance point of view, which is should be our concern, as opposed to specifically the fund performance, from a governance point of view, the thing that bothers me about it is that I just wonder whether the fund needs to have processes which are more capable of moving quickly in situations which arise, and it seems to be that we're, and it might be inherent in the system, but it seems to be that it's cumbersome. And I just wonder whether that is, from a governance point of view, that's something we should really be concerned about, or am are my fears exaggerated?
I think that I'd say that, I mean, tends to be a long process, but it's difficult to be quick, because, you know, there can be quarters and half years when investment managers don't perform very well for specific reasons, and then they recover. I mean, I think the importance is that there's a transparency and there is a clear process. Perhaps Jeremy would like to comment on that.
I think your comment was very helpful, Chair, in the sense that I think the first thing we need to remember is that it's very easy to be distracted by short-term movements in the market, and we need to recognise that the pension fund is a long-term investor. That we're looking to be able to meet liabilities which stretch out for 60 in some cases 60 or more years into the future. We don't need to meet all of those liabilities now, and so we're looking at a strategy which delivers in the longer term. Sure, you will get short-term fluctuations in the market. This year has been a sort of a particular example of that, where there was a significant fall off in asset values between February and March. That fall had been recovered fully by the end of August. There was a slight fallback between September and October, and there's been a surge again in November. So we do need to separate what I would describe as the short-term noise from the longer term performance issues. I think the other thing I'd say is that I don't think our processes are significantly different from other LGPS funds that I know about, in the sense that the formal decision making process is through a committee. If we want to replace an investment manager, one of the way we need to do that is through an appropriate process. I do think that having the London Civ will streamline and speed up processes once we've made a decision. For example, previously, if we decided that it was time to replace Oldfield with another manager, we would have had to undertake a manager selection exercise in order, and then get into a position to make the transition. We're in this instance we're able to use a fund which the London CIV has, which is already operational, and so we can simply move from the decision straight to the account opening and implementation of that transition, rather than having to grind through a procurement and manager selection process first. Does that help, Chair?
Yeah, but the problem is, isn't it, slightly the other way around, really, that having the funds in the CIV, the measuring of the performance of those funds might mean that there aren't as many changes as there would be in individual pension funds, because it'll need more than one local authority to agree that there ought to be a change of manager. And it depends, therefore, what measures of management are used by all the authorities in the CIV, or in that fund in the CIV.
Yeah, in terms of once at the moment we're in a position where we're moving from a manager that's not on the CIV to one that is. But I take your point that there may come a point when the CIV needs to replace one manager with another, and they have to grind through that process, having as you say, having been persuaded by all its client funds that it needs to do that.
Yeah, we don't know how that's going to work. I mean, I think that's one of the potential problems of the pooling system, really. But we shall see.
Yeah, and of course the government does seem to think that the pools will be better at manager selection than individual funds have been. That's one of their rationales for introduction of pooling, I think. I think we probably all have our own views as to whether they're going to achieve that or not, and indeed what skills they bring to the table that individual funds haven't brought to the table in order to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I've got one other point. 89.3% is the funding level at the moment.
Yeah, that's at the end of September. That's correct.
How does that? Do you know how that compares with our London boroughs?
I don't at the moment, Chair. Partly because I don't think everyone does a quarterly funding update in terms of their liabilities as well as their assets. I'll see what I can find out from colleagues on that.
Well, I mean, there's no real sort of benchmarking like there used to be of all the funds, so it becomes more difficult to find it, doesn't it? It's a bit haphazard benchmarking at the moment.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
It would just be interesting to know. Sorry.
What's the document on page 158 of the agenda?
That's
or 156, 157. Aren't they telling us that sort of thing?
No, that's what that's measuring is the PERC report, which measures the investment performance of the individual funds rather than the funding levels.
And it measures it somewhat imperfectly, as we shall discover when we get to that item.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Okay. Anybody got any other points on the on that report, the Pension Fund Committee report, item 7, or the supplemental agenda? No? Can we move on then to item 8, page 21, Pension Board draft annual report. Jeremy, you wish to introduce this?
Only very briefly, Chair. This is something that the board needs to own. The board's terms of reference require it, among other things, to make a report annually to the full council on its work in supporting the administration and governance of the pension fund. What I've produced here is a suggested draft which covers the financial year 2019 to 20, and that's shown at Appendix 1. And I was hoping that the board members might have any comments or suggestions that you wished to add into that paper for onward submission to the next council meeting.
Okay, open to the board. Any comments? Are you happy with the report as it stands as an annual report?
It's fine.
Yes.
Okay. I did see it before it came to the agenda, and I'm happy with it as a report. And you'll let us know if there are any comments, any feedback from the council meeting on the annual report.
Yeah, I will do. I'm not sure when the next council meeting is. I should have checked that beforehand, but I think it's probably the budget setting one at the end of February, actually.
Oh, well, anyway, my money is there won't be any comments, but nevertheless, it's a good thing to report and show that we exist and are doing the work that we were set up to do. So I think it is a very important report to go forward.
Yeah.
Okay, then we'll move to item 9. This is, well, it would be a bit difficult to say that the administration wasn't good in all the circumstances this evening, wouldn't it, as they've just won a prize for it. I mean, that becomes a bit tricky. The next council is on the 25th of February 2021. So it's quite a long way off, isn't it, really?
Yeah. So that will be, I'm sure, the budget setting one. So yeah.
Okay, item 9, page 29 then. Administrative performance. I was just saying we better not argue with this in all the circumstances. Just won an award. It would be a bit debilitating to say that they weren't up to the job, wouldn't it, really? So, however, Jeremy, you wish to introduce it?
Yeah, this is the regular update that we provide for you on the board's performance. There's been a relatively small number of changes in terms of the scheme membership, and those are shown in the table on under paragraph 3. There've been no complaints, no matters raised under the internal dispute resolution procedure, and no breaches of the law. As the stats in Appendix 1 show, that generally our performance remains of the administration task remains good, and as the chair has indicated, we've just won an award for scheme administration. So I don't think I can add much to that, really, Chairman. Thank you.
No, well, I mean, it normally is a good report, and we normally find, we are impressed by the administration. So we ought to minute our congratulations on winning the award, which is a significant thing. Any comments, Gerald, on the report, or Patrick?
Chair, sorry, you go first, Patrick.
No, I have no real comment. I was just trying to really understand from my own point on paragraph 3, pension members, 31st of March 2019. I just wondered why the total membership dropped to 18,161 in that period, when it's more numbers are more sustained across the other periods. Just trying to understand that really for my own benefit.
Yeah, odd.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I have no idea why that should be, Chair. It was before my time, but it does. I'd agree that the numbers do look a bit out of kilter with what's happened subsequently.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, what's happened more recently is that a number of deferred and active members have retired and become pensioners, and that's been offset by a small growth in the number of a small increase in the number of active members, because obviously the net membership has gone up by about 33 people since March. But probably the thing to note most is that there's a continuing decline in the proportion of the membership who are actually active.
Yes, I was going to say that. I mean, that must be universal with pension funds, really. But I mean, it is a worry. It's a long-term worry, isn't it? Really, that we're going to get to the stage where the pension fund is not sustainable in its current form, because there's not enough active members to finance the inactive members, if you see what I mean. But there isn't a lot of change here, but it is, well, it's 1%, no, 0.5%, I suppose.
Yeah.
Gerald, you had some points.
Yes. So, Chair, on page 33, the table, I must misunderstand this. So perhaps Jeremy could help me with it. So the Harrow actual performance percentage is against the Harrow performance target. Is the national actual performance against the national benchmark target? Is that what's being achieved in the nationally, or is that what Harrow's achieving against the national target?
That's what Harrow.
Because I've always understood it previously, it's what Harrow achieves against the national performance. So if you look at the second one, within within 7 days, it doesn't make sense. Because if you can do 100% in 7 days, but only 93% in 10 days, and when you go lower down, calculation and notification of retirement benefit in 3 days, you're doing 98.18% in 3 days. You're only doing 93.62 in 5 days. It doesn't make sense. And the next one is also. The next one down is also curious. Process, refund and issue payment within 5 days. You're doing 91.67% in 5 days, and then you say in the fourth column it's 95.83. It should be the same because they're both 5 days.
Yeah,
it doesn't. There's something not right there.
There's something not right with that one, Chair.
I'm not making a point of it, except maybe you could send us, you can email us a substitute page, please.
Yeah, I may have sent the wrong one out in error there, so I'll update. I'll send a correct.
Sorry,
you're absolutely right, Gerald. It's I can see immediately that some of those numbers don't look right. And,
on a general principle, though, we're right, aren't we? That because we've always looked at it, that the national actual performance is Harrow's performance against the national benchmarking target, and the national benchmarking targets are more relaxed than Harrow's targets.
Yes,
by and
that's
large.
right. That's right. That's right. We've set ourselves some tougher targets, but in the first one, the target, as you say, the first one, the targets are the same. The second one, the numbers are the wrong way round. It's not. There's something wrong.
There's something wrong with the table. I think. Yeah,
there's something wrong. But I mean, regardless of quite the accuracy of it, the performance is outstanding. So that's the main point.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to remember in some of these categories, there will actually be small numbers of cases as well.
Yes. Yes, so one makes a great difference to the actual total. Yes, that's true.
I mean, given the changed circumstances in which the staff are operating, to keep the performance going is, worthy of heavy praise. Well done.
Yes, indeed. It's very good. Okay, well, we'll wait some amendment to that or an explanation if there's not an amendment of how these figures can possibly be right.
They can't be right in their present.
I'm trying to be kind. Okay, anything else on this report? Then we'll move on to the next item, which is regulations and related matters. This is the item 10. And I mean, everybody's got themselves in a bit of muddle, haven't they, nationally, over the change in regulations, really, where I presume nobody thought that the local government pension scheme regulations need to be changed at the same time as they issued the statutory instrument or whatever they issued, cutting back large leaving payments for local government officers. And so, I mean, they got it out of sync, didn't they? That's basically the thing. And presumably the regulations will fall back in line.
Right, yeah, yes, Chair. The government has got itself in was actually tied us up in knots, in some knots with by introducing the exit payments regulations from the 4th of November without having the LGPS regs in line with them, does create an issue. I suspect that the civil servants responsible for the public sector exit payment regs were keen to do this, and probably didn't understand fully the impact that the difference, that why the LGPS is different from the other public sector schemes. The strain cost issue is unique to the LGPS because the other public sector schemes are unfunded, so there aren't employer strain costs payable in the same way if someone retires early. The other thing I'm not certain about in terms of the other schemes, but certainly it applies in the LGPS, is that if you're made redundant at age 55 or more, the scheme member is entitled to immediate payment of full pension without any reduction for early payment. And clearly, if the costs of paying that pension early take us over the 95k cap, it's impossible to comply with both sets of regs. I was on a listening to a webinar this afternoon from the Scheme Advisory Board on this one. The advice from the Scheme Advisory Board is still very much in line with the decision that the Pension Fund Committee took, that in the short term, anyone who might breach the 95k cap will be offered a choice of an actuarially reduced pension or a deferred pension. I suspect if any member gets offered that choice, they will make a decision and then promptly pursue an appeal, because they and citing the LGPS regs. And the fact that we haven't complied with them as the basis for appeal, and then we'll just have to deal with that. I suspect that somebody will pursue a test case through the courts, because one of the things I'm told is I know that a number of bodies have sought judicial reviewing, including the London Legal Officers Group. I'm not sure what the official. Gerald will probably tell me what the official title for that group is. I think
the people who are doing it are Alice, the local authority chief executives, and the local authority lawyers group. It's not the London ones. I think it's the national body. I don't quite know what it's called now. Both of them together have instructed a QC and junior counsel. I think they've both mounted a judicial review.
Yeah.
The curious thing about it is that the minister who had the greatest grasp of the LGPS over a period of maybe 20 years was Rishi Sunak when he was a minister at DCLG, and now he's in the he's head of the Treasury, or bar the Prime Minister, he's head of the Treasury. It's the Treasury who published the regulations which have got us in this mess, or got them in this mess.
It's got a lot of unintended consequences, I think, generally for local government and for severance, so that there are a lot of issues in this, really, that clearly there needs to be some form of court ruling to sort it all out, because it really is a mess.
That's absolutely true. There's the issue of strain cost factors. Historically, strain cost factors have been calculated on a basis that compensate the fund for the fact that it has to pay the pension early. If you're going to use strain cost factors as a means of reducing benefits payable to employees, you've got to have you need a set of factors that's consistent across the LGPS, so that a person in Harrow who's of a particular age and with a particular level of pension gets impacted in exactly the same way as a person in Brent and a person in Birmingham. And similarly, you've got to have factors that impact people with identical circumstances regardless of their gender, whereas previously the strain cost factors were led to a higher strain cost for women than men because of the fact that women tend to live longer. That was okay because it didn't affect the benefits payable to the individual. It was dealing with the funding situation. Now, if it affects a member, you can't have something that's gender discriminatory. So that's why GAD are producing new factors. I'm I heard today that it's unlikely that the new LGPS regs will be approved by the end of the year. And by the time the consultation ends next week, I understand, and the consultation will no doubt have highlighted some further concerns. In the sense that it, under the new LGPS regs, a member won't be able to benefit from both a redundancy payment and a strain cost, regardless of whether the aggregate of the two is anywhere near the 95, regardless of whether the two are anywhere near the 95k. And that clearly is going to have an impact on lower earning staff in the LGPS that goes way beyond what I think the intention of the exit payment regulations are. And I know that a lot of folks have made representations on that particular point. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes. But this is going to have a significant impact on the workload of the admin team, and importantly as well, we're going to have to be very clear to both employers and to any scheme members when we provide any quotations to them that they need to seek appropriate financial advice, but that it's not us who's able to provide that.
It's all. Sorry, after you, John.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. So, as well as all of that, you've got all the historic cases affected by McLeod, and
yeah.
Have you any can you put a have you any feeling about the volume of work that's going to generate for people? Because it's clear, I would have thought, I have felt ever since that judgment, it's going to put enormous strain on the limited staff capacity to review I don't know how many cases that are in payment now, or possibly for people who've died.
Yeah, paragraph 30 highlights, it does give a feel for the sort of numbers we might be looking at. The immediate priority is that there are about 500 pensioners who retired under the original transitional arrangements, and a further 225 who've retired since. We'll have to review all of their cases, plus the cases of around 50 deceased members. And in addition to that, there's probably another 3,500 of current active or deferred members whose entitlements we will have to review, and the timescale for that will be by 2023 is when we will have to do that.
And presumably these are all people who would get more money as opposed to anybody who's going to get less.
That's not necessarily the case. The likelihood is that there will be some people who get more money, who are entitled to more. There will be some people who are likely to get less, and there are some people who will get the same. The problem is we don't know until we've done the calculation in each case, and so that does prevent an issue. That does present a further issue. We've done some preliminary estimates in terms of the likely resource requirement for this, and we've started to think through how we're going to get the additional capacity in the team, and we'll probably do it through a mix of moving some existing staff onto this work and backfilling for the more routine work, as well as possibly getting in some extra capacity. The problem is, again, we're waiting for the regs and the software changes before we can practically do anything, which is holding us up on this one. But you're absolutely right, Gerald. The McLeod will have a huge impact on the workload for the team probably between April and April 23. So over that 2-year period.
It's just never ending, isn't it? Because you've only just finished the graduated.
Yeah,
pension.
that's right.
You had to review any number of cases. So, and here we are again with something completely different. But Yeah, it is a big problem. I just want one other point on the financial strain thing. I mean, first of all, of course, from a pension board point of view, it's important the authority don't do anything that follows the advice very carefully, because there's very many pitfalls for legal challenge in all this, and they need to be avoided, I think. And secondly, of course, for a wider, and nothing to do with the pension board really, but a wider local government context, this is going to have a massive effect on the way local authorities operate. I mean, I speak as a man who spends a lot of his life doing investigations and discipline.
Yes.
And I mean, it's been relatively simple to suggest to people that their time has come to take an exit and be paid off. But of course, this completely kills it off, really. And, you know, I mean, the pension strain in a lot of cases will be all they get if we're not careful. So there's big issues there.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I think I'd stop short of saying that local authorities have in the past used the LGPS regs as a way of dealing with issues that should have been managed through other processes. I'd certainly stop short of saying that. At least. Well, you're not an employee of the authority, Chairman. But what I would say is that it does reduce local authorities' flexibility to manage their workforce appropriately at a time when we're dealing with significant financial constraints, and it does reduce that flexibility in terms of workforce management and workforce planning.
It's interesting, though, that if you go back only about 10 to 15 years, pension strain wasn't even mentioned. In fact, the external auditors first staggered upon this and made it was in the audit regulations that one should actually tell the council the cost of the pension strain when you don't drew up people's leaving due. It was not mentioned at all. That was new to us all, that we had to calculate the pension strain. Up to then, we'd not even calculated pension strain as being part of the equation. So, I mean, this is a complete turnaround. Now, pension strain has become almost the most important thing in it. It's very strange, really.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly remember a time when it was commonplace in many authorities for senior officers to retire in their early 50s and have their pensions enhanced by the local authority, and the only calculation that was made was the cost of the general fund of that enhancement. That stopped about 20 years ago in most places, but you know, certainly think, as you say, times have certainly changed.
Yeah. Okay, well, and McLeod is a big problem we've discovered, and then there's the last section. Have you got any comments on?
Yeah, the employer flexibilities are likely to have a much more limited effect on Harrow than on many authorities. They were introduced primarily to deal with some of the admission bodies who were struggling as a result of COVID. For example, many authorities have got their leisure services contracted out to bodies whose ability to operate at a profit depends on people being able to go in and use gyms and swimming pools and the like, and those were closed during the first lockdown. So that was the initial intention of the regs, but they go a little bit beyond that and enable the fund to manage exit arrangements where employers are coming to for example, admission bodies which are dealing with a time limited contract for an outsourced service. When those arrangements come to an end, it enables the organisation, us to reach an agreement with those organisations on any cessation payments that may be due. Interestingly, we'll be able to put that one to the test slightly sooner than I thought we would, because we're in the process of managing a cessation. The Sopra Steria contract, which was one which looked after some aspects of Harrow's IT, came to an end at the end of October, and about a dozen staff were transferred back to the council on the 1st of November. So that'll be the first test of this one. the Goodwin judgment is an interesting case, but it's likely to impact on a very small number of scheme members. So I don't think it's significant, and I wouldn't spend a lot of time at this meeting on it unless others wanted to.
Okay. Any other points, anybody?
I think we'd like to be kept updated at this on a fairly routine basis, Chair. I think it's a major impact in terms of the administration of the fund and the good governance of the fund, and also I think it's going to have impacts all over the place, because I just wonder whether people will begin to lose confidence in local government pensions, because you thought you signed up to something, you were actually retired on that basis, and years later you find out that there are changes. It's just, there's so many implications of this. I think it's just absolutely enormous.
Yes, I mean, I go along with that. It's a big issue, really. The McLeod judgment is a colossal issue, and when the full effects are known, it would, I think, cause a considerable amount of aggravation by some people who thought they were settled and now discover that they're not. So, yeah, I mean, I agree we should be kept updated. This is a very useful report, this one. These issues are generally extremely important to the governance of the scheme, and they have risks if they're not properly dealt with. So it's very important.
Can I just ask one other question? Jeremy, you might not want to answer this, in which case say I'd rather not, or however you want to deal with it. But are the regulations just now impeding the management of the authority? In terms that managing having potential redundancies are now very, very difficult.
I think the short answer is, Chair, that I think there are two answers. But the first point is my role is with the pension fund, and of course the pension fund is Harrow in its capacity as the administering authority for the pension fund. So the one thing the pension fund can't do is issue an instruction to the council saying you can't make any redundancies, or you can't make any redundancies with a strain costs of greater than 9. That's a decision for the council as an employer. Yes. Which is different from the council as the administering authority.
Yes.
But what I will say is that colleagues at a senior level of, we've been working with legal to make sure that senior colleagues are aware of the implications of these regs and are acting appropriately in cases where there are issues around redundancy to manage. I think that's. Okay. That's what I can say. But the short answer is we will have to deal with individual calculations on the basis of the new measures that the committee agreed last week.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what we hope is that somebody else will have taken the test case before Harrow, because these things take up a huge amount of time, and it's better that a decision in Harrow is finalised as a result of someone else, of a precedent set by somebody else, rather than us having to spend hours in front of judges or whatever.
Yeah, we accept that entirely. That's an unnecessary expense on the fund, that would be. So let's hope that all works out. Okay, any other points on this report? Are we happy? We'll note the report, and we'll move on to the most substantial part of the agenda in terms of the paper, although it may not be the most substantial in terms of the comment. We shall see. Jeremy, do you want to take us through?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is just reporting the outcome of the audit. At the last meeting, you reviewed the draft annual report and accounts. The audit the audit work itself is complete. There were a very small number of changes made to the pension fund accounts. All of them were were in effect presentational or the additional disclosure notes, and those are listed in annex in paragraph 5 of the main report. I think what we should note there is that this again demonstrates that those colleagues who were here, and I arrived after these accounts were done, so I can't claim any credit at all for this. Shelley Jones did the bulk of the work, and the accounts were prepared to a very high standard, and the auditors have highlighted that in respect to the accounts and the working papers. The one thing I will draw to the board's attention is that the auditors didn't manage to sign off the authorities' accounts yesterday. Monday rather, the 30th of November, which is the statutory deadline. This impacts on although there are no outstanding issues with the pension fund accounts, the thing that they have to sign off for us is a statement of consistency with the local authorities of the annual report with the local authorities accounts, and they can't do that until they've signed off the local authorities accounts. And so we haven't been able to publish our annual report with our audited annual report by the statutory deadline. So I will flag that up for the board's attention. Work is rumbling on between those who are working on the authorities' main accounts to resolve the outstanding issues with Mazars. I understand that there are a significant number of councils across the country where the 30th of November deadline hasn't been met. Thank you.
Mazars, has that always been your auditor, or it's new this year?
This is I understand this is the second year Mazars have been in charge in Harrow.
Yep.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know there are a number of authorities for one reason or another who haven't had their accounts signed off at the 30th of November. I'm currently involved with one that hasn't had its account signed off for 17/18. So that signing off this year's by the 30th of November is a dream, a fantasy.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, yeah.
Any point
on
the annual report or account? Are you happy to note that?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so information only, so we're just noting it. And we'll move on to 12 then, which is the risk register review. And that's on page 122.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This report went to the committee last week. What we've done as part of this review of the risk register is tweaked the approach slightly. Whilst the scoring of risks and so on is the same and follows the standard Harrow methodology. What we have decided to do is to pull out those risks that are scored highest in terms of the likelihood and impact, so that they're ranked as red and amber. We pulled those out into a single list with the aim of focusing ours and the committees and the board's attention on those 13 risks, and then put those risks which are scored much lower and are ragged as green under the traffic light system in a separate annex. Also within that separate annex, we've identified that a significant number of the risks that were listed there are in fact managed as part of business as usual through day-to-day operational activities. And so we've suggested they be removed from the risk register and monitored through our day-to-day processes, and only escalated if it's appropriate to do that. In terms of the higher level risks, there are two new ones. The issue of the regulatory conflict, which we've just spoken about at length, and also the impact of the McLeod judgment on the administration workload. The third one that's escalated onto amber is one that had previously been scored as green, and this is essentially what I would describe as key person risk, and it's a risk that's inherent in an organisation where you've got small teams and expertise concentrated in a small number of people, and we felt when we looked at this that there's challenges that the organisation had experienced following Ian Miller's retirement earlier this year highlighted that actually this was a risk which probably needed to be rated, scored more highly than it previously had. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, that's 12, that one, isn't it? Operational, that's 12.
Yeah.
Okay, any points anybody's got on the risk register?
None.
I just thought it was very clear, very well set out, and I think I agree with the removal of the business as usual sort of items, because that will help focus on the key points as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, but it's well set out, I thought.
Yes, it's a good idea to split them up really and have a sort of almost an issues thing beneath it. Really, that's excellent. Gerald, have you got any comments?
No, I'm glad to see that it's had a thorough consideration, and you know, and it's been brought up to date. And certainly, putting in, if McLeod wasn't there now, yes, we'd have it. Then we'd have to worry about it. Why it wasn't there? It certainly needs to be there. It's a heavy thing, and I think it's absolutely, Jeremy's absolutely right. Key person is a it can be a significant issue. We know that ourselves on the board from the interregnum when between Ian departing and Jeremy arriving, and I think it is a significant issue. I don't, as he rightly says, it's that Harrow's a small authority, and it's difficult to see how you manage that situation. If anything, it's something that needs to be managed in, I would have thought, in levels either parallel with him in the Harrow Finance Department or above him. It's difficult to see how else you can in particular cover that particular position. But it would be very unfortunate if it happened again for the length of time that it happened this year.
Yeah, well, it's I mean, they're really people like Jeremy are a fairly scarce breed. Really.
Yes,
it's not easy to get people who you know, are into the pension side of the business, and it's so important because as the scheme administrators, they're sort of independent from the rest of the council, and you know, and you need to have some maintenance of independence really in sorting out issues. So. Yes. Key man is very important, and I'm glad that's been recognised. I think that's probably very good indeed. Anyway, happy we note that then with those comments.
I think Councillor
Sorry.
In terms of the contract, what was Ian's notice period?
I have absolutely no idea on that, Chair.
Any way we can put recommend that in future permanent positions are put as a 6 month notice period?
Intuitively, I'd
do that.
I think Harrow. I suspect Harrow. I'm not responsible for HR in Harrow, but I suspect those who are responsible for HR may wish to or probably would be concerned about having different contractual arrangements for a position such as head of treasury and pensions that didn't apply to other similar roles in the organisation.
I think for senior officers it's never more than 3 months, I believe. For more junior staff, it's can be less.
It's just an observation. A lot of companies for roles where there is a key personnel, they will have extended periods. Even my last companies I worked in the city, they used to have 1 year contracts that if you wanted to break it, you couldn't go move into any other company. So it's not something which is weird and wonderful, it is actually quite common to have different contracts depending. And sometimes it would be on a key salesperson or something like that, not someone who's a senior manager. So it's not just done on seniority, it's done on actual key position.
Yeah,
So,
but I think the issue is not only about a person leaving. Somebody can have suddenly be ill, and for either a short or a long period, and the experience that we had in the absence after Ian left and until Jeremy arrived was unsatisfactory. I'm sure it was the same for other parts of the pension committee, for example, and I'm sure that the powers that be in Harrow were doing their best, but the answer to that risk isn't exclusively about an individual. It's about having a process in the organisation which comes into play when when a situation arises, and I would hope that was what would be happening in terms of mitigating the risk, a plan for dealing with that situation.
Yeah, it's a sharing of knowledge and of keeping up to date that's important.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Can we note that then, all those comments? Okay. We move on then to the perk. I mean, I'd just say before Jeremy introduces, this has been a bit of a running sore with the Pension Fund Committee for a long while, really, because they haven't really liked the way PERC have done the monitoring, have they? And it's not as good as the original arrangements, of course, that have been in place for some years. Anyway, Jeremy, do introduce.
Yeah, I thank you, Chair. I think there are two sort of related matters here. For a lot of the LGPS funds, the performance monitoring of managers and the funders, the individual fund is done via a global custodian. And that's certainly at Kingston, where I worked before. Our manager performance monitoring was dealt with as part of the service we purchased from our global custodian. Harrow doesn't have a global custodian primarily for the reason that it doesn't have any segregated investment mandates, so it doesn't need a custodian for the purposes of holding stocks and shares in an individual account. And so it hasn't employed a global custodian. And it's engaged PERC to do this. The second thing that PERC does is it manages it oversees what's described as the local authority universe, which is a sort of a comparative performance data for 63 LGPS funds. That was a service that was originally developed by a company called, I think it was WM, yeah. and then subsequently State Street provided that. I think State Street took over the service from WM, and they provided the service. Around about 2015, 2016, State Street decided to withdraw from that service, and PERC bought the business, transferred one of the key members of staff, and acquired the historic data. And that's the point at which Harrow engaged PERC to provide both its own detailed performance management and the LA Universe stats. I think there are some challenges around the LA Universe. And I think the biggest of these is that the individual funds have different funding levels, different maturity levels, and hence have differing investment objectives and targets. So to produce a league table which ranks them from 1 to 63 is somewhat invidious. A fund that's perhaps better funded will have a lower risk profile for its investments, and probably a lower return objective, because it doesn't need that to maintain its full funding position. But it will show at quite a relatively low level in the league table. The the information that that PERC has provided is provided us with. They do provide some detailed performance data with the London funds, which makes some interesting reading. And the Harrow Fund's own investment performance hasn't been particularly good, and this has partly been due to the poor performance of some of its equity managers in recent years. I don't think I need to say much more than that, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Has anybody got any points? I mean, it's an interesting set of statistics. Are there any points that anybody would like to raise there?
Not really, apart from the way that we know that, you know, there are things which are going on which are out of our control, and obviously there's an impact to the fund, as we're aware. So not much we can do. Hopefully the government can do something different in terms of the way things are calculated in the future, but can't hold our breath really for that to happen. So we've got to deal with what we've got.
On the table on page 156, which gives the rankings of, I mean, over a large number of years, is that right that Harrow, they're over 3 years, it's not a very good return at all, or am I reading this table wrong? Is that not what it's telling me?
Yeah, it's actually telling us that Harrow's return is particularly poor, and that we were in the bottom decile in terms of our performance in the last 3 years, and that will partly, I suspect, some of the better performers may have had a higher percentage of their funds in equities. It will also be certainly the case that Harrow's equity managers have underperformed relative to those of other boroughs.
I mean, it's particularly noticeable over the last 3 years because it's 0.4 the return against an average of 1.9. So I mean that's quite significant, isn't it? Of course, it gets better as you go back. And
certainly the performance in 2019-20 was particularly bad, and that's exacerbated the 3 year. Obviously, the most recent year has a greater weighting in a 3-year performance table than in a 10-year one.
Yeah. Well, our 38th is our best ranking over 20 years, so it's not. It's better than 95, but it's not brilliant, is it? Really?
No, absolutely.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm concerned about it because I think I don't know I don't know what that. I mean, it's telling us, I think, that the performance should be better. Right? I think that's what it's telling us. Am I right about that? Because you've got, for example, Tower Hamlets might have been somewhere in the middle, but it's risen. It's really risen incredibly well, and is amongst the best. And I'm just a bit. I don't know. It doesn't. We don't seem to. I'm just wondering if other authorities' investment criteria, or how they arrive at them, or how they do their administration in terms of managing change and so on, is what are they doing that Harrow is not doing?
Right. I must admit, I think what I would highlight is that the funds are not strictly comparable. I think one of the ones to look at that I know a bit more about is Wandsworth and Richmond. Yes. You'll see Wandsworth and Richmond are over their 3-year performance. They're 87th. Yeah. One of the reasons for that is the Wandsworth fund at the 2016 valuation was I believe 100% funded. So at that point Wandsworth de-risked significantly and reduced the proportion of its fund held in equities, and equities did well between 2016 and 2019, and so Wandsworth's performance will have declined relatively, partly because its return objectives were based on the fact that it was already 100% funding, and so it needed to de-risk. Whereas a number of the other funds were much less well funded in that period, and so will have had a much higher allocation to equities. The one which is consistently at the top of the tree is or the ones which are Bromley and Bexley, and I don't know much about Bromley and Bexley or Kensington and Chelsea.
It could be a clue to why Bromley didn't want to go into the SIV.
I think it could be, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Gerald, did you want?
I was going to say exactly the same as you just said, Chair. Bromley is the authority that didn't join the SIV, and they're at number 3. Their ranking is 3, and it has it's been either 1, 2, or 3 over 3, 5, 10, or 20 years. So they must be doing something right. I think it's all you can say about that.
Yes, that's right, and you can understand why they weren't very enthusiastic about being forced to change.
Yeah. I think one of the things that is also noticeable is that if you look at the 10-year return, with apart from 1 or 2 outliers, a lot of the funds are grouped very closely together with returns of between 6 and 7.2, or between 6.1 and 7.2. They're, and for example, Brent with an average return of 6 is 88th, and yet Wandsworth and Richmond and Westminster with returns of 7.2 are around about are at the 31st and 35th centile. So there's over in that 10-year period the numbers are quite compressed, and a small variation in average return does have a significant impact on the position in the table.
Yes. Yeah, true. Okay, any points? Any other points? Can we note that then?
Yeah.
And we move on to 14, which is the work programme.
Yeah. What I tried to do here, Chair, was to pull together something in draft, which also as well as listing the things that we need to look at in the next meeting would be also to highlight the things that you would expect to see either at every meeting or on a cyclical basis. For example, the external audit of accounts report, you'd normally get in September. There are some things that you get every quarter, so I did try to separate them out into so that you get an idea of the things you were going to see every quarter, and then augment those with the other things that started to come up. So yeah, this is sort of an initial go at it, and if you've got anything else you particularly feel we should add, please feel free to do so.
Well, then the next meeting is the 4th of March, just to say that for people to note. There's no report on the training of pension board members. Now, we have had reports in the past. We're supposed to train as pension board members to keep a log of the training that we do. I mean, we're all guilty. Well, I'm guilty. I think I'm about 8 months behind on my log, but I do keep a log of pension board training. It was agreed that we would do that, and we would have a report on areas that perhaps you'd like to recommend that pension board members ought to be bringing themselves up to date on, or keeping up to date on, because you remember that the regulations that set up pension boards do actually specifically say that we're supposed to be au fait with benefits and with the regulations governing the pension fund, and that's a duty laid on us. And we have had reports in the past about what sort of training would be useful for pension board managers. And I think it would be useful to have that report again, perhaps in March.
Okay, I can certainly do something on that, Chair. To help me do that, would members be able to let me know individually what training you've taken part in over the last year or so?
I knew it was risky to raise it.
And and more importantly, if there are any areas that you particularly feel that we could look at.
Yeah, we'll certainly do that. I mean, Gerald regularly and faithfully goes to pension board training. I do a lot of pension training and pension liability training, and so I'm sure we can give you a return of what we've done over the last 12 months and give some thoughts to anything that we think is lacking. I mean, yeah. We are invited to the pension committee for the training beforehand. Sometimes that's more useful than others, really, in terms of pension board training, if you see what I mean. Not totally relevant, but it does give you an awareness, and that, you know, when the actuary comes to talk about the actuarial valuation, that's useful to the pension board to get the background and know what's going on. And really, we ought to make sure that, as far as possible, pension board members do attend those training sessions when they're particularly relevant. But I just think it's time we had a bit of a report on it, really, to ensure that it's brought to the fore that we are doing what we are charged to do as members of a pension board.
Chair, I'll just say that over the 5 years or so we've been operating, I've been to, I think, every single one of the courses run by SIPFA for pension board members. There's the annual full day that they run. They're always held in somewhere in central London, but the last couple have obviously been online. And there's one in the spring, and then there's a half a day, and then there's another half day in the autumn. I've done all of them. I do find it very useful, because if anyone ever said to me, well, what training have you done? A, I know I've done it, and B, you've met other people from all over the country who are taking part in similar things to that which we're doing. And I find, for someone who otherwise doesn't know too much about local authority pensions, that's where I pick up my knowledge from. I hope passing it on to people who I pass it on to might be useful. It's specifically for board members, and I'm not sure there is anybody else providing it specifically for board members. And I think it's useful. So I would commend it to people to attend. I'm sure Ian can, Jeremy can send the details round. If not, I'll send the links.
Yeah, no, I think it is very valuable, and we do value you passing on the slides and things to the pension board members who are not there. I mean, I think also I normally go to the seminars provided by the scheme regulator, what they're called, you know, the
Scheme Advisory Board.
Scheme Advisory Board, because I pick up a lot of stuff from that, and I think they're very useful as well and give you a lot of background. But yeah, I mean, this is why I think we ought to have a report, really, so we can share best practice, and it will help the new members of the board to sort of think, which is not a waste of time. I mean, that's the thing. There's a huge number of training things out there, but a lot of them don't really add to your store of knowledge in the way that there are ones that particularly do. So if we could have a report, and we'll feed into you before that report, Gerald and I, the things we've done and the things we'd recommend.
Okay, Chair, we'll do that for the next meeting, and in the meantime, if I get any flyers for anything which might be useful, I'll share those with board members as they come in.
Yes, thank you very much.
Out of curiosity, can I make almost an ask, or whether it's possible? Democratic Services actually do monitor people's training and etc. Can we add that onto their list of things to do to make sure that board members are up to date on training and are sending in stuff, and maybe we can give them some deadlines that they need to have it received by us or reports by us to do it, and they can put it somewhere so it's all tracked. So instead of us policing ourselves, it's policed by the Democratic Services.
Well, we'll pick that up in the report, and Jeremy therefore can consult and see what would be best. But we were asked at one point to send in our logs on an annual basis, I think, our training logs, but I think that requirement has fallen apart somewhere. We haven't been asked for it, which is just why I think we just need a refreshing report about training, really, so we can pick up all these issues.
I think that's a brilliant idea. It's good.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with that, Chair.
Anything else on the work programme? Can we note that? Okay, if there isn't any other business, well, at least I'm assuming there isn't, because nobody's actually mentioned to me that they've got any other business. So I'll assume that there isn't any other business, in which case we seem to have come to the end of the meeting. I'm very grateful to everybody for attending and for participating, and for all the staff who have worked so hard for us.
Richard, can I just ask one other question? Is there any progress in finding the second employer representative for the scheduled and admitted bodies?
The short answer is not yet, Chair. Although I did I did as a result of there was some challenges with the FRS 102 calculations. These are the accounting numbers that one of the colleges has for its accounts, and I did have a conversation with one of the senior members of staff about their FRS 102 reports, and this digressed into some other aspects of the management of the fund. And I did suggest that the individual might consider joining the pension board, and he said he would consider that. I'll follow that. I've given him a couple of weeks to digest the stuff I sent him. I'll follow that. I will follow that up. But
anybody who shows an interest in FRS 102 must be pretty special, so I should follow that one up and see whether you can persuade them to come on board. Okay, well, I'd just like to wish everybody a happy Christmas as you can have in the existing circumstances, really. And thank you very much for your attendance and for your participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and a happy Christmas to you.
Thank you.